After a great deal of export success with the previous Garibaldi and Pisa classes of armoured cruiser, the Regia Marina decided they wanted some more ships just for themselves, but they also wanted them quickly, so they ordered another two ships to an improved version of the Pisa class design, which would become known as the San Giorgio class. The most obvious sign of the redesign was that, thanks to a redistribution of the machinery, instead of having three funnels located roughly amidships, the new class had four funnels in two pairs, one pair somewhat forward and the other quite far aft, much like French armoured cruisers, although don't let a period Italian hear you say that. Since they were to be built in the middle of the 1900s, there was also a desire to test new and upcoming propulsion technologies, and so while the San Giorgio would be given 19,500 indicated horsepower driving a pair of screws via vertical triple expansion engines, the San Marco used turbines coupled to 23,000 shaft horsepower, which left the latter ship moving about half a knot faster using four smaller screws, capable of just under 24 knots, as opposed to the just over 23 knots of the San Giorgio. The two ships displaced around 10,500 tons, give or take a little, under normal load, and were armed with four 10-inch guns in a pair of twin turrets, one fore and one aft, along with a secondary battery of 8 7.5-inch guns in four twin turrets, two per side, clustered amidships between the funnel pairs. With 18 single 76mm or 3-inch anti-torpedo boat guns split between hull and superstructure mountings, a couple of 47mm guns, and three single torpedo tubes. Protection was impressive, with a 7.9-inch thick belt amidships, 2 inches on the deck, and 7.9 inches of turret armour on the big guns, and 6.3 inches on the secondaries. It should, however, be noted that the main belt was not particularly high, and so didn't cover a huge area of the ship. Although almost 2 years separated their keel laying, with San Giorgio laid down in summer 1905 and San Marco laid down at the start of 1907, by the time it came to launch the ships, the San Marco had almost caught up, hitting the water only 5 months after the class lead, although the San Giorgio opened the lead up a little bit by the time it was commissioned, as its July 1910 service date was about 7 months earlier than her sister ship. Unfortunately for San Giorgio, she then ran aground in August 1911, which meant she spent most of the Italo-Turkish War in dry dock, while San Marco got to have some fun shooting at various shore positions, since the Ottoman Navy largely refused to come out and play. But a few years later, the early sinking of two older armoured cruisers right after Italy entered the First World War meant that the San Giorgio and San Marco would spend most of that conflict kept well away from the front lines, only getting to shoot at something important with the end of the war during the bombardment of Durazzo. Post-war, with her older direct drive turbines being quite inefficient at cruising speeds, the San Marco was converted into a remote-controlled target ship at the start of the 1930s, a job which she survived throughout the decade, although there was precious little call for her services in World War II. When Italy signed the armistice in 1943, the Germans took over much of northern Italy and then tried to use her in their efforts to ruin La Spezia harbour, although that wasn't as successful as they'd hoped, and the wreck was then scrapped in 1949. San Giorgio, meanwhile, spent the 1920s ferrying dignitaries around and operating with various overseas squadrons. And then at the start of the 1930s, she was turned into a training ship, and in the latter part of the decade converted to better suit the role. Some of her boilers were removed to make more space, and the others were switched over to oil burning from coal. This reduced the ship's top speed, but also dramatically reduced the number of crew that she needed to actually run. Her anti-torpedo boat guns were replaced by anti-aircraft guns, her superstructure was revised, and additional light anti-aircraft weapons were also installed. But shortly before Italy entered World War II, she was repurposed yet again. With a few more guns stuck on for good measure, she was sent over to Tobruk to serve as a floating defence battery. Here, she led something of a charmed life, being attacked by ships, aircraft, and submarines, while sustaining only minor damage, largely thanks to very effective torpedo nets. But in early 1941, the Allies were advancing on Tobruk by land, and it was decided that instead of leaving, which the ship was capable of doing, The vessel should instead remain to support the land defences with its heavy artillery for as long as possible, as it was hoped that not only would the artillery be useful, but the ship's continued presence would help boost morale, whereas its leaving would tank morale. But the ship could only do so much, especially given as her mooring had been chosen with more of a mind towards sea and air defence rather than resisting tanks. And at the end of January 1941, Tobruk fell, and the ship was scuttled. But so useful had she been that, even though she settled in shallow waters in the harbour, the British decided they could use her and put her into service as a repair ship, which meant that she would survive the war and was subsequently refloated. It was decided that she should be sent back to Italy, whether for scrapping or preservation was up to the Italian government, and she set off for home in the early 1950s. But unfortunately she slipped her lines and sank on the way, and currently rests on the seabed somewhere in the middle of the Mediterranean.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.